Hey guys, welcome back to the History Shorts podcast. This is Peter, your host. This is your daily short format history themed variety show and weekly conversation series with leading voices in history today. Today's conversation is brought to you by thecollector.com, the ultimate online destination for anyone passionate about art, history, and culture. Beautifully curated, easy to read, and perfect for history nerds who want reliable, inspiring content without the fluff. TheCollector.com is just waiting to be discovered. And now, welcome to a very special episode of the History Shorts Conversation Series. Today we're doing something a little different, and a lot exciting. It's like two history podcast worlds colliding for an epic crossover. History Shorts meets History That Doesn't Suck. I'm thrilled to sit down with the one and only Professor Greg Jackson, the master storyteller behind one of the most popular history podcasts out there. Greg is a history professor, a frequent voice on the History Channel documentaries, and the host of the History That Doesn't Suck, where he brings American history to life with gripping narratives that, true to the name, never suck. And hot off the presses, or coming soon I should say, he's the author of the upcoming book, Been There, Done That, How Our History Shows What We Can Overcome, hitting shelves from Simon & Schuster in spring of 2026. It's all about drawing powerful lessons from America's past crisis to inspire us today. Greg and I are diving deep into some fascinating history talk, from his favorite storytelling moments to how the past can light the way forward. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's make some history together. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Greg Jackson. A quick word from our sponsors. Greg, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I guess my first question kind of starts off before the podcast. Like, what was the moment where you caught the history bug? Was this like a whole life thing?
Yeah, it's a whole life thing, but I do have an answer for that question. I always enjoyed history, even when I was a little kid, but I would go to, I believe it was the 10th grade. It was a high school world history class, Mrs. Berry, and she was lecturing about the Napoleonic Wars. And for me, it seems so basic as a historian now, right? To look back on this like aha moment, but uh, she was talking about prisoners of war. So Napoleon's army has advanced, Russians have been taken as prisoners, and Napoleon's soldiers start talking about the ideas of the French Revolution. And of course, there's all the irony that, they're now fighting for Napoleon and what Napoleon's done to the revolution and so forth. But it had never dawned on me the exchange that would happen, the humanity, right, of these men talking, these men who shot at each other, and now they're having conversations and they're forming relationships. And she talked about how those ideas would then go back to Russia and they'd sit rather dormant, but they'd percolate and let that simmer for several decades and all sorts of issues under the czars, and eventually it would help contribute to the uprisings that would later come in the early 20th century. So for me, this was a huge aha moment of, oh my gosh, look at the way we interact. I didn't have the words for it yet, right? But this is intellectual history. We're looking at the history of ideas. But this very, not names and dates, the realization of how people interact and the countless ripple effects, the butterfly effects, right? That change the course of world history. It struck my little teenage brain then and there. And man, I was hooked. I pretended to flirt with other majors in college, but I knew from day one I was going to be a history major. I declared it, right out the gate, and tried to interest myself in the quote unquote employable majors.
Yes.
But my love was just too deep, and so here we are.
It's interesting because I'm curious what your parents said to that. Because when I said to my parents, I want to major in history, and my dad's like, and what else? And I'm like,
Right.
A history for now. Second question, what are you going to do with that? And you try to like calm them down. Maybe a lawyer. And then when they hear the lawyer part and they're like, Oh, okay, okay. But
Oh,
there was never any desire whatsoever to be a lawyer.
sure, and I don't think there's a history major. I'm being a little hyperbolic here. There's probably not a history major in the country with a GPA over 3.5 that didn't consider law school at some point, right?
Right?
Like, it's tempting because it looks like a path. My mom, she'd probably deny this, she definitely not so subtly hinted that a business major would be a great idea a number of times, and I think my dad, this will sound more callous than I mean it to, he didn't really care because he had a college degree, but in his mind, he did sales. One doesn't really
Yeah.
need a degree.
Yeah.
He always, I remember him saying to me once, "Oh, Greg, I always figured you'd land on your feet."
That's
Oh, okay.
perfect, right?
Yeah, yeah, so I think in his mind, it's just, so what? He can go major in whatever. Sales is always a path, right? Because it's his path. That's the world he knows. So,
Yeah. For me, it's always like this question of like, what do I do for a living? Right. I mean, my kids are always like, people ask me, like, what does my dad do for a living? He's a college professor. You know, they ask what mom does and they say she makes the money. It's like, it's like, oh, okay, thanks. You know, like you
right.
kind of try to find meaning in what we do as historians, right? I mean, we find meaning, but to like the general public, it's almost like it's a stretch of trying to convene, somehow explain what it is that we do and kind of like our mission, right? And that brings me to, I guess, my second question. How did this podcast come about, History That Doesn't Suck? And was there a moment when you said to yourself, like, history needs to be told differently?
Yes, and it crept up on me. I look, I did the traditional thing you're supposed to do if, you wanna be a historian. I earned my various degrees, I got my PhD and started as a lecturer, and then very quickly got into a tenure track position, at Utah Valley University, and, a few years in, still a very young professor, uh, I this is hardly unique, I don't wanna, like, overstate it, but, Peter, I just knowing you to the extent I do, I'm sure this is the case for you, you kinda get the cult following, students, right? So I'm one of those sorts of professors where people joke about the students who have a who are majoring in Greg studies.
Yeah, they call
Right?
this for us. They call this a bleebers. That's what my colleagues called my.
Nice. Yes, I love that. I
Oh
love
yeah,
that. Yeah. So okay, it's reaffirming that all right, I'm clearly engaging in the classroom, right? Beyond the we call them SRIs, right? The student rating. Wow, I just blanked on the I, but student
that
rate
one
instruction, instructor something.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the thing. So yeah, beyond that, I knew that my students really enjoyed what I was doing in the classroom, and I I was always a storyteller. I don't think I was consciously a storyteller though. That was just kind of how I came at history always. A few things kind of converged at once. One, I was feeling some dissatisfaction with what I was doing as a professor. Now, that's not dissatisfaction with teaching. That wasn't dissatisfaction with my students. It was really honestly more on the scholarship side. The realization that I would spend years working on a single article, right, or several years on a book that, yes, advances human knowledge. That's the point. That's what we do. A PhD is a degree in research. It's not in teaching, as many a student sadly knows. It's definitely not that you're good at teaching necessarily. Um, but the thought that I was going to pour so much of my heart and soul into research and writing that would reach so few, that was really kind of devastating as that really sunk in on me in my early 30s as a young professor. It kind of led me to question like, what are we really doing? Some of this is really valuable. I think if we're really being honest, though, in the academy, some of it isn't that valuable. So I wanted to do something with meaning, and I was also looking through podcasts. I'm looking for things from me, things I want to listen to, and things have shifted a little bit. I'm Peter. We're having this conversation. This right here is evidence of a or college professor to college professor. But there were very, very scant professionals in the history space. especially in the top 100. I don't know, maybe there was one in the top 100, on the Apple charts at the time. If there were when I was looking at this back in 2017, I didn't know it. And in my mind, I just saw this jarring disconnect between the people who are reaching millions of Americans and teaching them their history and those who were trained to do the research. And I say this with nothing but respect for the people who were already in that space, who were doing it. And to this day, most are not trained historians, and a lot of them do really good work. Nonetheless, I think when you do have a PhD in this stuff, and I don't mean in a pretentious way, but you've been trained and you see where the connections aren't being made. You can see the difference. I wanted to bridge that gap, so I dared to think. I'm engaging in the classroom. Um, I want to research and write in a space where I can engage with the public. And again, I don't know that I was quite thinking this thing through that articulately, right? This is a little bit of the hindsight, kind of recognizing what those feelings were and now being able to put words to it. And so, yeah, I jumped into the crazy void of the internet and launched History That Doesn't Suck. And by that, I meant a few things. One would be the narrative, right? That it's storytelling. Um, what we do in the academic space is wonderful. It is excellent history. It is what needs to be done by professionals. And we also, I think some even with some degree of pride, though they don't think of it this way, they just gut the soul right out of it. They take the story out of history. And that's what makes it so undigestible for the public. And yet we will then sometimes scratch our head and wonder, why doesn't the public want to read our stuff? We kind of made it inaccessible. So I wanted to articulate that I'm going to make this accessible, but I also wanted to make clear, at least in my mind, not suck in terms of the rigor. So it doesn't suck in terms of storytelling and delivery, but also doesn't suck in terms of rigor. I'm not going to sacrifice the quality, the academic training that I was given for entertainment. The history will always come first.
You have that. I can't even imagine being in your classroom, because just listening to you, you have that storytelling thing. You're a storyteller, which is awesome. And with millions of downloads, did you ever think that you were going to be right here when you started this thing?
You know, the answer, of course, is no. Was the daydream there? Of course, right? They're like,
Yeah.
wow, wouldn't it be cool if this thing really took off? Well, then it did. You know, no, I can't say that I could expect the success that I've had, even if, sure, I hoped for it, but no, that's like expecting to win the lottery.
Yeah. No,
You know?
and I mean, well, it's a lot of work though.
Well, it is, right?
Not much winning. Yeah, you put a lot of work
That
into this.
That's very fair, and yes, I've worked very hard, and over the years, I have had to reflect and think, like, "Why is this working?" And, of course, I've, over time and partly due to outside feedback, I've come to appreciate, okay, these are the things that I do that have enabled the success to happen, but it's a combination of factors. I think anyone who's seen any great success, regardless of their field, you're going to see insane amounts of work, and my wife and kids will attest to that. It's all I Yes, I put a lot of work into this, but there's also, um, there is a bit of luck to it, and, meeting other wonderful people who help, you know, form a foundation. You stand on their shoulders, and, or they give you the lifting hand, pick your analogy, but, there are a lot of wonderful people who've come along the way, and, of course, and I'm sorry if this sounds cheesy, but it's true, uh, n perhaps no one more so than just the millions who have tuned in, right? Like, this thing has grown word of mouth. Um, I to this day, I don't have a, massive company that's, like, pushing me. I have an excellent ads, company. Don't get me wrong. I'm repped there, and that's important. That's part of what enables me to keep doing this and to keep upping the professionalism of it.
Yeah.
Uh, but, I never had some big PR machine that was blasting out. There's probably been a few $1,000s spent on Google ads by me over the years, just experimenting with it and
Yeah.
realizing, nope, that's not a very successful path. That's not worth my money. So it's grown word of mouth, and I'm nothing but grateful to the the hundreds of thousands of regular listeners, and
Yeah.
I guess millions overall who
Tune in.
listen, share. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple of things in here that, you touched upon that were great. And one was the fact, I mean, and I'll get into the listeners and what they do for us and all that stuff. But the first one is like that extra helping hand from the random person, that, and sometimes it comes from a place, you never expect. When I started writing, I wrote my first, I'm not sure if I ever shared this on the podcast, but I wrote a first query letter. I was sitting on the couch on a laptop and I had this idea, and I was barely a writer yet. I'm in my 30s. I haven't really written much. And I had this idea about John Adams, and I wrote a query, and I'm like, oh, let's see some magazines. So I typed in, and one of the magazines that popped up was American History, at the time one of the top magazines. And I'm like, oh, I'll just send this query there. Meanwhile, I just Googled how to query like 20 minutes before that, right? So I'm
Right.
so I'm like, how do you query? Okay, well, so I'm like, hey, my name is Peter Zablocki. I have this idea, blah blah blah, and I send this thing out, and I'm still sitting on the couch, like 9 o'clock at night, and my phone rings, and it says Washington D.C., and I'm like, Washington D.C. I don't know anyone in Washington D.C. So I pick up the phone, and the guy's like, "Is this Peter Zablocki?" And I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "Hey, I'm Mike. I'm the editor at American History magazine." I'm like, "Oh my god!" And he's like, "That was the worst query letter I've ever read in my entire life." And I was like, "Oh my god!" the fact that this guy picked up the phone at like 9:30 at night just to tell me how much I suck. It was life changing, though, Greg. Life changing, because I'm like, oh my God, I'm sorry. Like, what do you say? Right. So he's like, all right, this is my number. Call me tomorrow. I'm going to tell you how to write a query letter. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I didn't know the guy.
Right.
So needless to say, I'm talking like 2 weeks, probably 10 back and forth emails of him correcting things, redness, crossing things. I mean, he spent hours with me, never met me, didn't owe me anything. About a week, 10 hours worth of stuff. He finally, back and forth, destroying my query. After a week, he finally emails me back after the latest thing, and he's like, Pete, you got it. This is a perfect query. However, I'm not interested in the piece. I was like, what? Get out of here. But I was so thankful for the guy. I'm like, okay. He goes, well, at least you now know how to query. And I was like, yes. I mean, thank you so much for taking the time. And I didn't get upset. I was like, this guy taught me something. Again, he doesn't owe me anything.
Right.
And then the next day, I am CC'd on like 10 emails. He emails 10 different editors, including Smithsonian Magazine, who I work for now. And it's like, hey, this is Peter. He's got, a lot of potential. This is, hey, Peter, you take it from here. Like, he introduced me to all these people. And again, this is a guy I never met. I wrote a sucky query letter. That's it, right? And from then, I had 3 cover articles from just those emails within the next 6 months. I wound up winning an award for journals and articles from the U.S. Army. I wound up getting hired at the Smithsonian as the history correspondent. This is all just from a guy that decided to call me. He could have just ignored that email.
Right.
Crazy. Like, you never know. And I always say this to everybody that I meet, my students, like, you never know. Just put your best foot forward and hope that there's kindness in the world. You never know.
And even if your best foot is a terrible foot.
You said it sucked.
You know what? I love this. Do you mind? I know this is not what you necessarily planned on.
Oh,
Can
go.
can we talk about failures that lead to success for a second? I mean,
Of course.
one of the things that, I always get hit with in an interview, it's always the great success that is history that doesn't suck. And don't get me wrong, there is that, but a side of things, and you're bringing us there, and so I'm excited to lean into it, is that, well, as I always tell my kids, the biggest winners you see out there, these people with all these great successes, and people look at them and they think, oh, how lucky. And yes, I just acknowledged luck is a piece, right? They are also the biggest losers. Anyone who's won, they have put themselves out there again and again and again, and they have been bloodied, in figuratively speaking, right? And like Theodore Roosevelt getting knocked out in his boxing match back at Harvard, or not knocked out, but the punch that came after the bell, he grins back through the blood at his foe. That is you've gotta have that sort of drive and ability, uh, and it does take good people like this. So as you tell this story, it reminds me, um, so I'm repped by WME at this point, William Morris Endeavor, and I have a wonderful lit agent there. We'll talk about my book, right?
That's next. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I've got that now, and I could not be more excited. Years ago, though, when the podcast was getting some moderate success, of course I wanted to write a book. I'm an academic. We're trained to write books. But again, I wanted to write for the public, right? So when I'm first trying to turn that write a book corner, I figured out the podcast thing, but the book is a different animal. I sent out letters, just as you were doing there, to lit agents. And I had a spreadsheet of agencies and agents that I had contacted, and it was just, no response, no response, no response, right? It I'm not getting any bite back. And w very rarely did they actually bother to say no. For the most part, you just kinda go, "Okay," dead silence after a month.
yeah.
I'm assuming I'm never gonna hear back. One gentleman who, his name escapes me, I should look up that name, but he wrote back a very kind "No, thank you," and I wrote him back and said, "Thank you for that. Can you please tell me why?" And he did. He said, "Sure, if you wanna know, I'll give you that honest feedback," and he said, I was shopping an entirely different idea, at the time, more of a I was still so academic. I was basically ready to write a textbook for the public, which I still think is a good idea, but that's not a breakthrough into the author world concept, right? So he just said, "Look, yeah, that idea is not compelling. That doesn't go well with the markets, and your writing was fine. That I found it fine. The level of the idea with the writing, though, the writing would have to have been, Stephen King in order for this sort of idea to fly. And your writing's fine. So for me, this is a no." So, okay, all right, hey, thank you. And I could then internalize this idea doesn't work, or I need to somehow yet improve my prose. Or it's both, right? Become a better writer and get a better idea. I like to think I've done that now.
Yeah.
But, I appreciated, this agent who knew he had already said no to me. He had no interest in moving forward, but he stopped to say, "Okay, this guy wants feedback. I'll give him feedback."
And it's also interesting too. You mentioned this, and we're going to get into your book now, but writing for as a script of something you're going to read and say on a podcast is so different than writing, and for writing for someone to read it.
Yeah.
And it took me literally took me like a year of already podcasting, um to realize that, what I mean, because I'm always writing for someone to read it. I write an article and then I'm reading it and it seems like robotic, like I'm not engaging because I wrote it for someone to read it, not for me to say it. And
Yep.
it took it's a skill, man. It's just like, I mean,
Nope.
you got that skill, but it's a
Thank
it's
you.
a skill.
No,
you
it's
know
it's quite different. For some instances, if this entertains some of the listeners, when we write something for someone to read it, we might start a quote, and then we're gonna interject in the middle of that quote, "He said," and then
yes.
continue to quote. You can't do that in podcast form. Or you can, but it doesn't work as well. Uh, so you've always got to identify who's speaking first before the quote is said. It's simpler, shorter sentences. You've got to, at least I think of it this way, I'm verbally giving you footnotes without making it obvious, because I want to make sure my audience knows that I've researched this. I want them to be able to follow my sources if they want to. I put them on my website, but there's a difference between seeing my bibliography versus the footnote on the page. And so I'm trying to verbally, always acknowledge.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more making sure you're calling out exactly who that primary source is, or who that author is. Whereas, in writing, you just quote,
Yep.
footnote.
Yeah,
Boom.
insert.
Gone.
Yeah, be
Yeah.
done. Yeah. So let's talk about this book of yours. Been there,
Sure.
done that. How our history shows what we can overcome. No, it sounds like you had this in the back of your mind for a while. It's and you finally got down to writing it down. Can you explain kind of how this idea came to be? But also, if you could, without giving away too much, maybe share one favorite historical example from the book where America faced massive upheaval and emerged stronger.
Big
So much
questions.
there.
Let's
Yeah, I know. This
let's
is a multi-part question.
all good. Yeah, let's do this. So, on a level, I would say it is the culmination of one of the other pieces of why I started this podcast. Uh, I am painfully, as you know, Peter, you've listened. I'm painfully apolitical in the history I do. That's something I believe that maybe painfully is the wrong word, but I mean I go to great lengths to do my best, despite being a human and having my own biases, to ensure that I am representing each side as they would represent themselves. An important mentor in my life once said to me, "You're not ready to debate until you can describe your opponent's perspective with such clarity they would nod in agreement and say, 'Yes, that is what I believe and why.'" And that is how I approach history. So, whether I'm giving I'm not to modern day yet, but I always think of this even in the era. So Republican and Democrat means something wildly different in, say, the 1870s than it does today. But nonetheless, I want to articulate what people in those eras thought, and I want to be able to make sure I'm articulating what they would say, how they would represent themselves, were they brought back from the dead right this moment and asked to explain where they were coming from. Um, to me, that is important for the American project, for our liberal democracy, our constitutional republic. We have to be able to have that sort of discourse. And that to me is one of the crucial reasons why we even do history to begin with. It's about keeping this great experiment of ours going. Um, like Thomas Jefferson, I believe deeply that education is crucial for a republic to thrive. So, um, that was a kernel of why I wanted to make education free and accessible to all Americans, and something that, as I strive to do in the classroom, I could stand by saying, "Yeah, this isn't meant to try and give a slant. I'm not trying to help party A or party B. I'm I'm looking to educate. I want people to understand what philosophical concepts are, well, I'm going too professory. Let me dial it back. I'll kind of cut that thought there. So point being, I guess more expressly at this point, this book is where, as I've had to, like everyone else, I listen to pundits talk about how things have never been worse, and I think for any historian, you kind of slap yourself in the face. And I mean, the low hanging fruit, of course, is the Civil War. Really, that should be a pretty easy an easy point in history for us to identify as worse than the present. But there are so many other examples, everything from fake news to political violence to contested elections. All of those are addressed heavily in my book. And I wanted to bring back to America's recollection that we have done all of these things, maybe not with the same technology. We can talk about some of the small differences, but in large thematic ways, we have been there and done that.
I mean, we teach that. You could teach history thematically if you want to. If you just teach conflict, you're teaching all of world history. There's always conflict, right? And I had someone during the election, I forgot his name now, but he's written a lot of different books about elections in American history. And the question was, how divisive is this current election? He goes, exactly how it's supposed to be. They're supposed to be divisive. These people are not supposed to like each other. That's the whole point.
Yes.
And I was like, absolutely.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, that is, I mean, look, is there slinging, dirty plays, things that we'd like to not see happen? Of course. So you don't wanna just say that all of the worst behaviors of humanity are signs of a thriving republic per se,
Yeah.
and yet it is also the living, breathing proof that liberty, as the framers, as the founding generation conceived the word, is alive. It's that very conflict. This is what James Madison. I did not expect my book to have as much Federalist Papers in it as it ended
Hmm.
up having, but that's basically, if I were to grossly simplify Federalist number 10, that's one of James Madison's main points, is that you cannot have liberty without ugly partisanship. They go hand in hand. They are one and the same, more or less. He describes liberty as being like oxygen. Well, that doesn't mean you have fire, but it's an essential element, right? It's a key ingredient to having fire. And he tells us, look, it'd be stupid. He obviously says this a little more eloquently, but you wouldn't get rid of oxygen because you don't want fire, right? That's a
Yeah.
terrible answer to the problem. You've got to learn to. He uses the word control, right? Control it. Now, no generation's done it perfectly, right? It's always messy, but as imperfect and messy as those answers are, and the process is, I remain an absolute fanboy of representative government and believe that that it is our best answer thus far as a species. Uh, so for us to somehow think in the present that conflict is evidence that things are breaking down, no, conflict is a necessary given. Um, so I wanted to demonstrate that we've seen this over and over and over again, and we're going to keep doing it.
Could you argue that if you think about politics and the discussions around politics, that ultimately it's the same conversation that started in 1770s, which is what is the purpose of government, but also where does government come from? You know what I mean? Like what is government and what is its purpose? I mean, isn't that ultimately the conversation that all politicians are still having?
They are, and I'm going to put an American framing on it simply because we're speaking about, an American, we're talking about the United States of America.
Yeah.
I have really latched onto, and perhaps this is, partly to do with Jeffrey Rosen. Am I recalling his last name
Mhm.
correctly? Right.
Yeah.
I very much like what the founders suggested about the pursuit of happiness, and that essentially that is what it's all about. I noticed in the Federalist Papers, happiness. This is actually something I did not put into the book because I'm not trying to rewrite a book that's already out there, of course. But happiness appears in the Federalist Papers. The word is there over 80 times. Um, what we're really arguing about is the best system to facilitate our ability as people to pursue happiness. And if you think about it in a way, really, you can see that healthcare. Well, the government should provide it. Well, the government shouldn't provide it. Whichever side one is on, it's usually grounded in the idea that if the government provides this, people have access to it. What we're really saying is that leads to a healthier and therefore happier life. With the other side arguing that government gets in the way, botches it, drives up prices. What we're again essentially saying is happiness is going to be more accessible if government stays out of it. Right? Again, I'm not interested in that's also not in the book. I don't debate healthcare policy. Just grabbing something out of the air there. I'm not looking to comment on it here either, but pointing out that we see that battle happening, and it's really about what's going to serve society, lead us to happiness better. That's the way that Americans have thought of it, and what we have fought tooth and nail over is being adamantly convinced, two separate sides adamantly convinced that they are right about the path to happiness. And when those paths conflict, sometimes we handle that in a healthy way, and sometimes we don't handle that in a healthy way. And the thing that I would hope readers realize is that we do that in an unhealthy way just as much today as we did in the past. Like, this isn't some moment that is terribly unique in our dysfunctional handling of it. And along with this dysfunction, there's also some functional fighting, that the grinding of gears, the checks and balances, those aren't accidents. Those are there by design.
When does the book come out?
It comes
Summer,
out
right?
It comes out
right
in June.
before?
Yeah, June
Yeah.
16th. So just in time for the 4th.
Yeah, perfect. So now that you finished the book,
Yeah,
and as you know, we talked about before, it takes a very long time to put these podcasts together. Are you already? Because usually, what happens, as you know, when you write a book, you wind up getting ideas for another book. Do
sure.
you? Are you already like, okay, like I'm already thinking ahead here? Are you thinking ahead or anything?
Oh my goodness. I've got a few ideas percolating, nothing that I think I wanna go on the record for just yet,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, I know what you mean, because of course the
One leads to another. They just do,
yes, yes, exactly.
right? Yeah.
But I think my wife and kids would also like me to not lead right into the next one immediately. So,
Yes. When do you write? Do you tend to write more at night during the morning before everyone wakes up? Do you have like a routine of when you write?
that's well, I'll tell you for the last 2 years, it's basically just been, when I'm awake. Um, it's to give a little glimpse, right? We talked about the hard work piece, keeping up with the podcast and writing the book. The book had been in the works for more than 2 years, but the last 2 years have been very intense, since getting the contract with Simon& and Schuster and, of course, then working for delivery. 7 days a week. For instance, this, uh, this this November, Thanksgiving, this was very typical, but I'll just use it as an example. Thanksgiving Day, I'm up, I'm writing. At 1 o'clock, we had our family meal at my sister-in-law's. She lives just up the street from me. So at 1 o'clock, I walked up the street. I had the meal with the fam. I thanked my sister-in-law for her kind hosting. And by about 1:50 or so, I was walking back down the street. 2 o'clock, I was back at
Wow.
my desk.
Wow. Isn't that
And
crazy? That's
that,
crazy.
it's the only way to get it all done.
It is. It is. You gotta.
Uh,
If someone said to me, "You want to write? Sit your ass in a chair and write."
yes.
Look, that's like the hardest part. Just like get yourself down because once you get down, okay, take a deep breath. I got this, and then it just starts going. It's just that you have to make yourself. Oftentimes, it's not like today I'm going to write. Yay! No, it's like you have to put yourself in that chair. And
And you have days where you don't wanna write at all,
oh yeah,
and you have
no,
to do it anyway.
yeah,
The podcast, of course, every episode's approximately 9,000 words, and that's every other week. So that keeps me plenty busy in and of itself. But, yeah, to do the book on top of it, I
that's a lot.
yeah, about 3 weeks ago, as the manuscript went in, and I spent the weekend with my wife and kids. And I don't wanna make it sound like I haven't seen them, in 2 years. But, I spent more time than usual, right? Like,
Yeah,
which I think most people just call an average amount of time. And the kids were like, "Wow, what's going on?" "Well, I delivered the manuscript, kids."
yeah.
That's what happened. Um,
And they're like, "What's for dinner, Dad?" That's what
yeah.
my kids are. I'm like, "Guys, I got this thing published today. It's so
Oh,
cool."
yeah.
That's great. That's great, Dad. That's cool. All
I
right.
know. Yep.
What's for dinner?
100%. My youngest, yeah, I'm not even sure he looked up, right? He's just playing on his phone.
Yeah.
"Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Manuscript.
son.
Yeah, that's cool. That's
Thank
cool.
you. Thank you."
I'm with you on that one. Oh man. Yeah, no, a lot of work goes into this, definitely. So mine are dailies, but I do about 1,000 words for each one. And even now, my wife took a week off, between Christmas and New Year's. And, so I don't want to offend anyone, but so I get up at like 5 and I start writing, start writing. And she's like, why? Just take off a week. I'm like, that's not how that works.
Yep.
Like, I'm like, the show must go on. Like, I have to
Here,
keep
you
on doing
understand.
this. And
Yep,
she's just like, really? And I'm like, yeah, like this. I can't just be like, hey guys, I'll be back in 2 weeks. No, no, no. That's just not how that works.
exactly. Yep. No, it's always amusing. I think you'll understand this, Peter. It's always amusing when you talk to some people who are like, "Well, you deserve it. Just, you
Yes.
should take some time off. No, go get some you time. No, you don't understand. The treadmill is moving,
Yes.
and if I don't
Yes.
keep this pace, I stumble and fall. I've got to keep moving."
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
100%. Your live shows, I mean, you're are like multifaceted with how you spread the love for history. And I assume that has to be nerve wracking when you're like a rock star on stage. Like,
So, yeah, that's been an interesting evolution. I did my first live show a few years ago, And in a way, it was a return to my roots, because are we not always on stage in the classroom, right? So getting away from this situation behind the mic, I thought, yeah, this will be natural. This will be back to what I know. Nope, I was super wrong. There is a world of difference between speaking extemporaneously in the classroom and having dialogue with your students, and being on stage in front of hundreds, or as
Thousands.
my biggest venues, yes, we
Yeah.
put 4 digits there, and it is just crazy. So I'll tell you, the very first show I did, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, so this is some fun, nuggets for you. I come out, I play my theme song. I wrote that, and so I come out playing my guitar, and oh, I missed a chord change altogether. I wrote the song, right? It's my song, but I was so terrified. I was so nervous. And I grew up playing guitar. It's not like I haven't been on stage before. But what I haven't had is the spotlights on me. And like, this is right, it's Professor Greg Jackson. Um, and I was just so terrified. And I mean, the show went fine, and my wife assures me that only those who like
I
her
know you.
know me, yeah, could see like, oh yeah, because I'm I'm an extrovert, and I am a very comfortable, public speaker. I
Yeah.
couldn't have the career I have if I weren't, right? But she said, yeah, I knew you were nervous, but I also knew that no one else in the room, these, strangers, they did not know you were nervous. You weren't that, she was trying to reassure me. She's probably full of crap, but that's okay. Um, so it was a terrifying moment. And the live show, I call it the unlikely union. And in 100 minutes, I take listeners through 100 years of American history. That's kind of the tagline. We go from the Revolution through the Civil War, and the protagonist of the story is the Union itself. And I take the listeners through the idea of forming the Union and the craziness of that, the compromises, the hard fight, then the hard fight to keep together, the existential crisis of the Civil War, the healing that comes afterward. And all of this, it does speak very much again to the present, right? Where people are so. Are you seeing a theme in what I tend to do, Peter? It
Yes.
wasn't
Yes.
intentional, but I guess it's the core of who I am. I am a sappy patriot at the end of the day, and I believe deeply in this republic, and that clearly comes across in all of my work in some way, shape, or form. But it's verbatim, right? I wrote this show, so I can't just get up there like I'm in the classroom. Oh, gee, what was I saying? Where am I going? No, I've got music that is cued to exact words, right? I have to
Oh
hit
man.
timing. So I've memorized. It started with memorizing large sections where I could monologue and get away from the podium, and sower's leg. My leg just shaking at the thought of doing this. I didn't realize I was turning myself into a full on stage actor, but I've overcome that. The show is almost entirely memorized at this point,
Wow.
and yeah, I love doing it. It's like delivering the ultimate lecture. Imagine if you could take your favorite subject, write word for word perfection of how you wanted to deliver it, right? Of course, it's not perfect. There's no such thing as the perfect lecture, but perfect for me. And now you've got, you know, the perfect slide set.
Yeah.
You've got music swelling to bring in the right emotion.
Thousands of
Got
people
light.
looking at you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're dressed all sharp. You're ready to go. Craig, you're a rock star on that stage. You're like a history rock star. That's awesome. I assume, like you said, so it does get easier, right? I
Yes.
mean,
Yes. Well,
okay.
and that's the thing, right? It's all of these mediums. I remember the first time I turned the mic on to do the very first
This.
podcast.
Yeah.
That was a terrifying moment. Like another aspect of succeeding at anything in life, you'd have to do things that terrify you.
Yeah.
It's there's always the trying to suss out, am I afraid because it's a stupid idea, or am I afraid just because it's new? And if it's just because it's new, that's no reason to let the terror stop you. Uh,
Ugh. I have people ask me that are I would say famous, I guess, or successful YouTubers that I know. They're like, why don't you just get on YouTube? And I'm like, well, because I don't want to see myself. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? I don't want to do that. And I like the idea of a podcast. And, you're an audio guy too, is that I could put a podcast on and go for a run. I
Right.
could put a podcast on and mow the lawn. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the second that I am recording myself talking, now I need to sit down, and that's a different level altogether.
Well, let me just say though, Peter, you have an amazing setup. This is YouTube ready, man. I'm looking at what you've got. It looks gorgeous back there, and you're a handsomer man than you're giving yourself credit for. You
Thank you.
you might consider it. It's, you can.
It's a different thing though. It's
No,
such a
it is,
different
it is. Look, and I've
right?
thought about getting into that space because video podcasts are, of course,
Of course,
increasingly a
that's what
thing.
everyone's gonna tell you. That's where it is. That's where
I
it's at.
Yep, I will tell you, I'm thinking about that, but I'm thinking because you can't just turn a switch, it is a very different thing. So thinking
Yeah.
through what it looks like, what I'm doing, I don't know if it makes sense for storytelling unless you're gonna be able to do animation. That's a
Yeah.
whole 'nother
I
level
need
of
more people. You
production.
got it's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
But I feel like you skip that because by doing live shows, it's almost like if you take steps, right? Like I'm talking, I always say, like, what do you do? I yap on the internet.
Right,
It goes great. And then, now you YouTube, so you have to like memorize more stuff because you have to make that eye contact, whether you have a teleprompter or not. It's different.
yeah.
And then then you go, if you go on stage, that's like you surpassed all of that. So you almost skip the whole stressing over, YouTube thing. Like you're in front of thousands of live people. Like you said, you can't screw up. This is live. Versus in YouTube, you could at any point, I mean, you're not live, you could say, scratch that, stop. Like I'm gonna play that chord correctly this time. Like
Yeah.
I feel like you're ready. I'm not ready, but I think you're ready.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So I want to finish up just some basic conversation, and I mean actually basic is a terrible word for this because it's not basic, but just conversation about history as a whole, right? Like when I was studying history, when you were studying history, we're similar in age, and we went to college, and there were certain authors you just knew, McPherson, you knew McCullough, like there were these historians, and I feel like we're coming to a change in a sense of study history because of podcasts. You know what I mean? Because of filmmakers. I mean, Ken Burns was coming out. Obviously, we have on you the Civil War, but I feel like now the study of history has been almost, I want to say the mantle has been passed because you still have these great historians, but I feel like history has been handed over to this new medium. The medium that you and I are kind of this playground that we're in a sense, right? What
Right.
do you think about that, and what do you think that means for the study of history?
Um, that's such a thoughtful and excellent question. It's, I mean, it speaks to, of course, the general shift that's happening, far beyond history, right? It's not like it's just the history crowd that's gone to podcasts. But, first of all, it changes the way that we absorb that history. As throwing back to the very beginning of our conversation, you write differently for a podcast than you write for a book. So the delivery changes. I'm constantly trying to make sure that I word things in a way that doesn't require someone to have to visit my footnotes, in notes, etc. In the podcast. I think it makes it more accessible. Not that people can't read; we're a pretty literate nation, but podcasts are free to listen to. So, yeah, you listen to some ads if you don't wanna do a premium thing and avoid the ads, that sort of a deal. But I think that is wonderful. And again, that's one of the reasons why I went into this space, and I'm sure that you'd say the same, and many podcasters would nod and say, "Yeah, it's fantastic that, uh, that we can make education accessible um, for people uh, who don't have the luxury of going back to college. I love when I hear from my trucker listeners that a few of them have jokingly told me that I am trucking university, that they're just trucks, going across the United States. Apparently that's been a word of mouth, space for history that doesn't suck. And I love that, right? These ladies and gentlemen who are taking care of the nation's supply chain, and they're just learning all day long, be it me or someone else. And that's a convenience that the audiobook kind of filled, but it's on another level when you can just go to a podcast app, it's free, and the selection is all but endless. Also, I think we don't want to overstate it either. Not, and I'm not saying that you were, Peter, but print medium will continue to play its role. I think what you're suggesting, or at least this is what I'll suggest, it's more that we've kind of shifted where the focus is. That podcasting is now kind of taking the crown in a way.
Yeah. But as you mentioned, like you need to print because that's where I go to get the stuff, the information for my podcast. You know what I mean? Like I go
Exactly.
to the research. You know, I listen to podcasts, history podcasts for entertainment and to learn something. But when I put together, as you do, you keep on
Yeah.
saying footnotes, right? Like we go to that print, we go to those guys. You know?
And that's where it can't die, right? That's always going to be there. Though you and I are also going to some of those more esoteric at times works. Y We're citing some public-facing historians. You mentioned some names that are near and dear to my heart. David McCullough is the lone, celebrity, I guess we'll say. He's a celebrity in my mind for sure, whose death, uh, moved me, and I don't mean like I don't care that someone died, but,
Yeah.
when I see when you see someone f act as though a close friend has died when a celebrity has passed, I didn't understand how people could have that feeling until David McCullough died. That's when it hit me. Oh, okay. Got it. Got it. I'm not pop
Yeah.
culture-y enough to have felt it on, actors, and so forth, but my man, David, this guy who I've traveled through history with for countless hours, right? Through his prose, you feel like you know him. So that was a humbling experience for me as well to grow in terms of understanding others. But yeah, those people will always be there. But you and I are also reading books published by academic presses, not trade presses. Am I getting tuned to the weeds here now?
No, you totally got this. Yeah. I mean, but I always try to give credit where credit's due. It's like I'm reading a book that is published by, U Chicago Press or something. And I'm like, this
Yeah,
is not going to be a Barnes and Noble's pickup, like,
yeah,
but this is brilliant, like so you have to say, according to, like I
yep,
fear the need, like I need, but I'm also like, I don't want to sound too academic, but I want to say, and I do. And I'm like, according to, because, this lady that wrote this needs to be mentioned because this is brilliant. There's a lot of cool history. I mean, I'm looking at my bookcase. There's just David McCullough. I just had his daughter Dory and his main researcher Mike on the podcast a couple weeks ago because they edited his new book History Matters. I don't know if you read it yet, but it's a quick
I
little read.
haven't. Yeah, I know. It's on
It
my
is
it's
yeah,
on my
the
list.
pile. It's on the pile.
Yeah.
But a great book. And I was telling them, and as I'm reading this quick book, I took my pen out because I'm like, all right, I'm gonna just anything that like kind of inspires me as I come up with questions for this interview, I'll just put an asterisk by it. And I started putting asterisks across everything. And I'm like, I felt inspired by everything that David said. I'm like, all right, yeah, just forget the pencil because he's talking about not the facts, like you mentioned. He's talking beyond the facts. He's talking about the meaning behind history. Like, what is history and why should it matter and why does it matter? And it almost makes me feel better that I told my parents all those years ago that my major is going to be history. This
Yeah.
is why I said it. I guess my final question, if you could require every American or your student or whatever to learn one lesson from many lessons in US history to better navigate the current times, what would it be?
Um, I would say one lesson. Gosh, forgive
Yeah,
me. I'm gonna stumble just a little bit, Peter.
go, of course.
you, you can either let this play out in all of its glory,
Yeah, just go for it. Yeah,
or
that's perfect.
when I stumble to the right clip, you know, you go ahead and use that.
Yeah, I love it.
Okay. As you ask me what one lesson I would bring into the present, my mind goes to chapter one of my forthcoming book, and it's on the gazettes of the 1790s, the Gazette print war. So this is the Gazette of the United States, which wanted to be an apolitical newspaper. Mr. Fenno aspired to basically be the government's mouthpiece unofficially, and he turned into a Federalist rag. And he did so in response to the National Gazette, which was founded shadowly, if I can make that an adverb, by Thomas Jefferson, who was so upset at the Federalist bent of what Fanon was doing that he he went and found himself an editor who would basically be his own mouthpiece. He put Philip, as the man was named, on the State Department's payroll because Thomas Jefferson was Secretary of State at the time, and as a translator. And even in the offer, I mean, we have this letter, right? And I quoted it in the chapter. He says, "You will have ample time to pursue, other interests." Now, what is that other interest? He knows what that other interest is. So he's literally got on the State Department's payroll a guy who's basically meant to be the opposition newspaper to essentially what you could arguably call the administration's newspaper. Because Washington, though not a Federalist, he was always, I'm not in a party. In Jefferson's mind, and I think plenty of historians would agree with this, Washington tended to lean Federalist. When Hamilton and Jefferson went to the mats and fought over policy, Washington more often than not found himself siding with Hamilton. So Jefferson is so convinced that the Federalists will be the destruction of the United States, that they are evil monarchists. He's justified in his head. Now, let's also keep in mind different laws, different customs. Today, this sounds especially egregious. I like to try and give some, grace to the fact that this is a new nation and all the rules are literally being made up as they go, right? But this is just, it hits us so in such an ugly way to think of basically a government-funded opposition newspaper. And these men, they said and did terrible things, in print, behind each other's backs. These are the founding fathers. And I still hold them in the highest respect. They are my heroes. The ideas they articulated were so great that no generation can live up to them. And that does not mean we shouldn't strive to live up to them either. What I would hope, and it's what I've attempted to articulate in this book, is that we can hold on to those dual aspects, the recognition of imperfection that we can never completely overcome, and yet it is our duty as a republic to strive to overcome it, right? That we are a more perfect union. We're never going to be the perfect union, but they gave us a more perfect one when they dumped the Articles of Confederation for the Constitution in 1787. And through all the errors, the hypocrisy, corruption, wars, bloodshed, you name it, we have nonetheless come, I would say, in our 250th year as we celebrate the idea of America, we have become a far more perfect union than what we were when we started. And despite everything in the present, I see no reason why we won't be saying the same thing, why our successors won't be saying the same thing 250 years from now. And I hope they look back at us, at our failures, and scratch their heads at how stupid we are, the same way that we look back at some of our predecessors and can't fathom how they could accept some of the imperfections of our day. And that's not because I'm hoping that we are that imperfect, but because I'm hoping they have made such greater progress.
Greg, I want to buy your book now, and I want to sign you to a 4-book deal just based on that answer. That was great. Oh my God, that was powerful. It makes me think of like when E.H. Carr wrote What is History? And he stated in it that every historian, it would be impossible for them to be truly 100% objective, but they should never stop trying to be objective. They should always strive for that, knowing that they'll never get there, but that should always be at the forefront of anything they write.
It is a Sisyphean task. Sisyphus,
yeah,
to mythology, pushing the stone forever up the hill. And then it falls back and it does it again. That is being a historian. That is participating in representative government. And rather than being defeated by the fact that it can't be won, we have to embrace that it's the nature of our existence. It's what we do. And we can, and I think should, do that gladly.
Greg, this was truly an amazing conversation, an awesome honor. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Peter. Truly.